So this is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for Vagabond Buddha. I left the United States in 2007. I've been to 65 countries, and in this video I'm going to answer the question, top 10 reasons why you should retire internationally. But the first one I'll mention is that it's more exciting. So I actually left the U.S. 13 years ago when I was 47, and I worked for the first few years full-time, and then after that I was part-time, and now I've just been doing this YouTube thing for the last few years. And one of the biggest reasons to retire internationally, it's just more exciting. If I look back, I think back about the life I had in the U.S. and what I might be doing now if I were living in the U.S. retired, and it just wouldn't be as exciting or fun. There's just no other way to say it. Because I'm traveling around the world. I'm getting to know different foods and cultures and religions and architecture, and so it's kind of an adult playground. My life is now. And if I were in the U.S., it has some great stuff there, beautiful parks and beautiful cities, New York, New Orleans, no doubt about it. But there are only little nuanced differences. You're not going to get the big kind of differences you're going to get retiring international. So I would say maybe one of the number one reasons is you're just going to have a much more exciting life by retiring internationally. And I'm a slow traveler. That means I'm in several countries a year. I go real slow. I go to my favorite cities in each country, and as you know, I write reports about the best places around the world to retire cheap. And so I gather data and I share information with you, and because of that I'm learning along the way, and it's just more exciting. I would say the next most important thing I've noticed is that other people perceive me. I have a greater perceived value in other people's lives, and that may sound like a silly concept. But when I'm in these other countries, I'm a foreigner, and I'm from America, and they don't know much about me really. I'm a nice guy. I'm polite. I'm well educated. I'm open-minded. I'm thoughtful. I'm a nice representative of my home country, so they see me as interesting. But when I'm in the U.S., I'm just another nice guy driving down the road in my car, and there's not really much about me that's that exciting. And so I have a greater perceived value when I'm outside the United States. And how that translates to your daily life is maybe you'll meet more interesting people because they're interested in you, and they want to know what your story is, and you'll end up doing things that you wouldn't have done in your home country, and you'll learn things, and so because society, no matter how we want to look at it, in each of our individual countries, society has almost a sliding scale of how people are perceived. And if you somehow find yourself a couple of notches up, you end up going to different in this perception. I'm not saying that it's real value. I'm not saying it's your spiritual value or the value of your soul. I'm just purely talking in a social sense, which is not as important, as developing, your personal character. But it's also true that if you meet exciting people around the world, because you're perceived as a greater value, that many of them also are interesting and have a view of the world that you probably wouldn't have seen or understood or even known about had you stuck around and retired in your home country. So because I have a greater perceived value, more opportunity comes my way. At home, I'm just a nice guy. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but when I'm traveling the world, I'm suddenly interesting. The next thing that's nice about it is, when I think about what it would be like to be retired at home, it's kind of predictable. There's only so many things I can do. I mean, yeah, I could, there's some strong variances. I could do a lot of travel within my country, but the difference between you know, New York and New Orleans and San Francisco, it's a big difference, right? Or Miami Beach or Chicago, Seattle, there's some big differences there. But there's not a lot of it's not unpredictable. You speak the language, you know what the chain restaurants are, you know how to go to Yelp and find out where to have dinner, you know where the mall is, you know where the movies are. Each city has its own museums and culture, but not really that different. They're just subtle differences between the cities. And so, but when you go to another country where you may not speak any or much of the language and you're discovering a new place, it's very unpredictable. Things don't always work out how you wanted. Days don't turn out how you thought they would. But the unpredictability brings a chaos or an excitement to your life, and so there's a bit of excitement that you're not going to get if you set your retirement up, you know, in the good old your home country. And so there's an unpredictability that really is exciting about retiring internationally. The next thing is that you need to, in my opinion, you need to engage your brain in retirement, right? Because and there's a lot of studies about this, dance, the martial arts. The more neurons you connect in your brain and the more you keep them functioning, exercise, the longer you're going to live, the more meaningful thinking and understanding and perception you're going to maintain into your as you grow older. And education is one of the things that will keep those synapses and those neurons open. And so all the learning you're doing, when you're learning words from different languages, now you're not going to travel around the world and learn 200 languages in retirement. I'm certainly not. Maybe you're that intelligent, but I'm just a normal guy, right? So I'll pick up a few polite phrases in each country, depending on how long I'm there, and I might know a few more the next time I return to that country or a country with a similar language. But overall, everything about it is educational. The roads go in different directions. The signs look different. You have to learn how to read menus, and you just don't know what anything means, and so you're constantly learning. 24 hours a day, or at least during your waking hours, you're learning all the time. And so your brain's constantly being worked, and it is exciting to live in a world where you don't have it figured out yet. It's like being young again. Everything's new to you. It's new, exciting, and education to me is probably the most important thing about international travel, is that you're starting, when you enter a new country, you may have some preconceived notions of what it's going to be like, but you're going to get a serious education. And so I would say international retirement is educational, and that's one of the greatest benefits about it. Now, depending on what the next thing is that your lifestyle, in terms of the food you eat, where you live, and that could be increased. If you go to a lower cost country that's cheaper to live, you could eat higher quality foods, you could live in a nicer apartment, you can live a higher quality life by retiring internationally. If you go to a lower cost country, of course, you know, there's many countries that are more expensive than the US, and so if you go to one of those, you're going to live a lower quality of life, except for I would argue that there's a compensation in that perceived value that will give you this good or better life, even if you go to a more expensive country. But it's cheaper to retire cheap internationally. Certainly to all the places where I write retire cheap reports, it's a cheaper cost of living, and you're going to have a more exciting life. The next thing I would say is there's a bit of mystery about everything, and this is a little bit, it's tied into the education and the excitement and all that, but when you show up in a new country each time, there's a bit of a mystery. Are you going to like it? Is the food good? What are the people like? And so every day when you get up and you're perceiving your new environment, it's all unfolding, and you're beginning to form opinions about everything and understand that place. And so that mystery you wouldn't have that mystery in your home country, and it's so the mystery brings an aliveness to life. You're awake, you're paying attention, and you're more focused on each moment of your life, in a sense, because you're trying to unwind that mystery. Also, you're going to still go home. You're going to go home and visit family and friends, and you're going to end up at reunions, and you're going to end up at family parties when you go to your home country. Maybe, like, I try to go at least every other year. If someone in my family is getting married, I'll go home. Or my mother was sick last year, I went home for that. So you never know quite when you're going to go home, but you're going to see your family and friends, and you're going to have, this is going to sound silly, but you're going to have a higher return value when you return to your home country, because your friends, maybe they've seen your pictures on Facebook, and they've seen that, wow, they've been to so many countries, and they see the pictures and they're like, wow, someday I want to go to that place. And so the funny thing is that they might ask you one or two questions, but mostly they want to tell you what their dreams are, and so mostly you just want to listen, and you'll find out that pretty quick. They're really not that interested in what you learn. It's better just to, in life in general, it's better to be a listener. And so you're not going home and bragging about what you're, where you were and how your life is better than them, and really they should leave the country. It's not about that. It's just that it's almost like, a red carpet is rolled out for you. And if you compare to what it might have been if you went to that same family gathering when you were, you saw them 3 months ago at this party and 6 months ago at that, and you haven't seen for a couple of years, and now they know you've been traveling around the world or whatever. It's just your value, your social value is higher. And I know that sounds silly, but it is one of the benefits. This kind of goes with education, and that is that, I don't know, when I'm in my home country, everything's figured out. I don't have to do any thinking at all. It's like as soon as you get home, it's all the same. Nothing's changed. A building might have gone up here, but everyone's, politically, the same arguments are there, and there's still whatever the preconceived notions of life were. The people they're telling me the same stories again. The people that were fighting, the husbands and wives, they're still fighting. The ones that were, getting their business going, their business is going now. But it's all basically the same. And so there's not, if you retire in that, there's not a lot of new information. There's not a lot of brain processing. So I would say that, because you're traveling internationally and you have both this new world you're in and you're discovering new worlds all the time, and you have the old world, I would say that if you compare that to retiring at home, I would suspect my brain would atrophy a little quicker, but I'm more awake. Those synapses that I talked about are all firing because I'm being educated, and I'm discovering this mystery every day. And so you're reducing the atrophy of age that comes. The next thing that I notice is that you'll find that when you're in your home country, since everything is figured out, there aren't that many challenges each day, you're not really challenged at all in your life. And so there's not much of an opportunity to push beyond your boundaries, or to really notice when you push beyond your boundaries. When you're in a new country and you're uncomfortable, maybe it's too warm, or you don't know where you are, you're lost, or you've got your phone out and you're trying to figure out where you are on a map, or you're trying to translate with a local, maybe you're using Google Translate and you're speaking in English and it's speaking in another language to them, and you'll get frustrated, and you won't find the food you want to eat. And so you're going to discover all these personal boundaries. Also, you're going to discover you have all these thoughts about how the world is in your home country. Electricity works this way, and that cars should be on this side of the road, and this is how a dentist and doctors and shopping centers are like this in my home. So you have all these things, how everything needs to work this way for you. You start when you leave your home country, you're like, this is weird, they do stuff different here. Why do they do it this? And what you learn is that your mind is challenged, and your mind can run off with you in these big conversations about how terrible it is around the world, and it's better in my home country and this kind of thing. But what you're really discovering is personal, that you have these boundaries that that are challenging you. chaos no longer is your enemy. In fact, you won't even discover much chaos in your home country. The chaos will create sort of mental blocks or boundaries, and you can break through them and find out what are these people? What are they about? And like one of my early travel spots was in India, and when I left the U.S. in 2007, and I lived for India for 3 years, and I was amazed. At first, I was annoyed. Everything was so different. But after I'd been there a couple of years, I started to realize they're solving all of these problems without some of the tools or the training. They're just being very creative problem solvers, and so they're pushing through all of these things that might have stopped them, and they don't even know it because they grew up in this place where they just have to be creative to get through life. But when you go there, you're like, I want this tool, and this shouldn't be that way. Why do they have it this way? And it's crazy. Don't they know how it should be done? But once you've been there for a while, you know that suddenly you realize that you're around all these creative people that are solving problems in all these different ways. And you begin to see that your mind is limiting you, and you begin to push through all these boundaries you had, and your life becomes more interesting because instead of getting annoyed, you look for another path to get to. It's really the result you want. It's not the path to get to the result, right? That's a boundary that you have, that you need to run on the same path. I'm a rat. I got to run on the same path and get the same cheese and go to the same place. You'll push through all that, and you'll find out that you can solve problems. You can be in this world in new and interesting ways, and you learn about yourself. And so you push past these personal boundaries you have. And once that's happened, one of the final things you'll begin to learn about yourself as you travel around the world and learn about the world and yourself is you'll discover that you'll discover some inherent, fundamental values and meaning that you have that live across societies, and that animate your purpose in life, or your being, or what makes you you, without all of those limitations that it's attached to this society. And so like when I was in the US, I always had this idea that transactions should be what's called win-win. In other words, in order to really to create a transaction, whether I'm the buyer or the seller in the transaction, is to create it so that it's win-win. Both parties get value out of it and feel like they've gotten value. And this is just one example, but and that carries throughout the world. And there's some parts of the world where that isn't a normal thing. People are just, and not everyone, I'm not implying that everyone in the US believes the transactions should be win-win. That's a segment of society that believes that, but not everyone. And around the world, you'll find there's more or less of that way of thinking. And this is I'm just giving you one example of how you'll discover inherent meaning about who you are as a person by living internationally. But you'll discover that that's a value that you have that other people really appreciate. And you'll discover that there's these values that are all over the world that aren't in some countries, but they're in others. And you'll discover which of those make sense for you, and which of them you want to carry with you, even if they're not in a culture you're presently in. And that's just an example of one. When I feel like I have to give value and receive in order to deserve value back, and that has a characteristic of creating long-term relationships, not just with friends and family, but with people you're in business with. And it's a very rich way of living, and it creates long-term relationships. I've discovered that that's a value that does travel throughout the world. There's many other values. I talk about them in all my videos. I mean, people are basically the same all over the world. They want to take care of their family. They want to feel good about themselves and others. They want to contribute. They want to look good. They like I talked about perceived value. They want to be perceived by others as valuable and provide value to them. And they actually want to give that value. The idea that it's safe in your home country and that everywhere else is dangerous or different or weird, I haven't found that to be the case. I've talked about this in other videos. I think it's overall some of the basic values that humans have. Those transfer across societies, and some don't. But I think the nice part about retiring internationally is you discover which of those are important to you, no matter where you are in the world, because some of them, no one's going to care about them. If they're in some way benefiting from it, they'll care about it and appreciate it, but they won't be expecting it from you, but you're just doing it for yourself. A good example of that is tipping. I mean, when I get good service, I love to tip people, because I have this belief that if I'm good to people, that comes back to me, and it's always been true for me. And so I continue to tip even when I'm in societies where there is no tipping. And sometimes you have to be careful, because there are societies where people think it's like an insult, like you're trying to buy them or whatever. And so you have to be cognizant of that, and don't try to tip someone that, in a circumstance like you wouldn't tip a professional in the U.S., like a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. You just pay their bill and they're happy. So mainly just service, and so there's little nuances. But the important thing is that if you retire internationally, you're going to discover things about yourself, what your boundaries are, and what is inherently meaningful about life to you, and how that you want to manifest that in the world. So those are 10 of the top reasons why I believe that you should retire internationally. To me, it's a self-discovery, it's a world discovery, it's educational, exciting, and you're going to me, my experience is that you're going to live a more interesting life if you're able to arrange it in such a way that you're spending a good part of your retirement, or at least each year, outside your home country and finding out what makes the world tick and what makes yourself tick. All right, this is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Thanks for listening to my story about the top 10 reasons why I believe that you should retire internationally. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Hey, don't give up on your retirement dreams. Come check out our Retire Cheap reports all over the world. You can probably retire somewhere in the world beautiful like this for much less than you thought. Thanks for watching. Click the link below this YouTube video. Click the link in the notes below this YouTube video to get a copy of all the resources described in this video and a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World. And while you're there, check out our 80 Retire Cheap reports and the course that teaches you how to make money as you travel the world. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Please like this video, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would help our business. We'd sure appreciate it. Thanks so much.